Welcome to our presentation of Web Accessibility, ADA Section 508, What Does It Mean for Your Website, recorded at our WordPress St. Petersburg Meetup at the Tech Garage.
Okay, this is WordPress St. Petersburg. We're going to be doing a talk on ADA accessibility, and let me introduce two of our guys here who've been coming to several of the WordPress meetups. This is Joe and Steve. Have at it, guys.
Hi, everybody.
Talk away. You ready?
All right. Well, we got our web accessibility. This is about web accessibility, ADA Section 508, and what it means for you and your website.
So we're St. Pete Design, Steve and Joe. I'm Steve Curtis. This is Joe Lopresti. We've been making WordPress websites since 2012. And one of the things that we recently started specializing in is web accessibility for WordPress. Just to give you a little background on why we decided to do that, last summer, Joe and I attended the National Federation for the Blind convention in Orlando. And it was a really moving experience for both of us. I don't know how many, well, by a show of hands, do any of you know someone that's visually impaired, someone that's low vision? Okay. It was really moving because we didn't realize how hard it was for people with low vision to use the internet. We sat in on a couple of classes. I remember one was specifically about browsing the internet, and I was just blown away at how hard it was for people who can't see to use the internet, something that we take for granted every single day. So that's why we decided to get into web accessibility a little more. Next slide, Joe.
This outline, this talk's just going to be a few simple things. We're going to talk about what is Section 508. We've come up with 11 easy steps to try to help your accessibility compliance. And at the very end, we've offered some developer tools that you guys will be able to use on your own that'll just help you in your process of becoming compliant. All right, Section 508 and WCAG. WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and the most current version is 2.0. That's basically the worldwide guidelines for web accessibility. When we talk about accessibility, it's not just low vision, it's just disabilities in general. And there's multiple different kinds. And, you got auditory, physical, speech, all kinds of stuff. We personally have a super soft spot for the low vision. Because, like Steve said, that's what we went and witnessed, and it really touched home. Section 508 is basically the American version. This has to do with federal agencies. A little note here is that if you are in WCAG 2.0 compliance, you will be Section 508 compliant. But if you are only Section 508 compliant, you are not WCAG compliant. So Section 508 is a slightly watered down version of WCAG, and it's strictly for federal agencies. And we believe it's going to be moving on to corporations and bigger business, but as of right now, it's strictly for federal agencies. Few facts here. Over 1 billion people worldwide have some sort of disability. That's a lot of people. And again, we're not talking about just visual, just disabilities in general. And of that, an estimated 253 million people have some sort of visual impairment. And then you want to funnel it down a little more. Of that 253 million, you got an estimated 19 million children are living with some sort of visual disability. And I have 2 kids myself. I know Steve has a child, so watching my kids with technology, it's just way different than when I grew up and when an older generation grew up. I mean, they are just intertwined with technology. It's just part of their reality. And to think that there's 19 million children that cannot access any type of technology like that it was just mind-blowing to me when I saw that stat. And that's one of the big things. We all know kids are our future, so we want to be able to give them every opportunity that they can.
Okay, so why does Section 508 exist? And why should we make our sites compliant, okay? This is why. It's a blank slide, right? This is what your website looks like to some people. Okay, believe it or not, So all that great stuff that you do, all of that time you spent on making your website look perfect, when the client wants you to use that really cool font that you've never heard of, none of that matters to someone if they can't see it. So this is what they see. I mean, it's mind-blowing, right? So how do you make your website, how do you make it to where someone who's low vision can see it? How can they use it? Well, that's what we've come up with, 11 steps to help you out with 508 compliance, okay? So we're going to take it one step at a time. And the first one is to provide alternative text for non-text content. Here's an example. How do you add alt text? All right, this is your average website. This is in the media center. What's the name in the back end? Your media library of your WordPress website. Okay, so if you click on the picture, there's a little spot right there where you can enter your alt text. All right, to be 508 compliant, you have to enter an alt text. Believe it or not, I didn't used to do that when I first started making WordPress websites. I had no idea. I didn't know what's the alt text for. I had no clue. So next slide. What do good alt text tags look like? What's a good example? Okay, for this picture here, this would be sufficient. It's a picture of a field of flowers. I don't know if you can all read that, but that's what the description says. If you wanted to be a little more descriptive, this is actually, there's mountains in the background. You could add something like that. It's actually taken outside of a place called Dillard, Georgia. This is the Dillard House in Dillard, Georgia. Maybe you could even add that to be more descriptive. And the reason why that works is when blind people use their screen readers, that's what'll show up. They obviously can't see the picture, or if they can't really make out some things like we can. So your alt text shows up on their screen reader when it reads their website. Okay. Next step, label your form elements, all right? So how do you add form labels to your forms in your website? Well, this is an example from Contact Form 7, okay? You can see these are label tags. You got a start tag and an end tag here. And they're automatically added in Contact Form 7. It's a very popular plugin. So if you're using that, it's going to automatically add your labels for you. So what do good form labels look like? Okay. Well, that's it. Your name. If all you want is their name, just put your name. It was in there on the last slide, in between the label tags. Your email, whatever it is, it needs to be descriptive so that someone who's using a screen reader, again, knows exactly what that form element is for, or what that specific label is for. Okay, so another thing, step number 3. We're going to go kind of quick here. The slides will be available for you later. Add manuscript or closed captions of audio for videos, and add an audio description for all animations. So how do we go about doing that? What do closed captions look like? Most of you are going to be familiar with closed captions. This is an example from a video that Joe and I did. It's a YouTube video. There's your closed captions right there, and obviously that's going to help someone who can't hear the video, right? Joe, I know you had something to add about closed captions on YouTube.
Yeah, we personally recommend if you're going to do a video and you're going to put it on the front end of your site, YouTube is fantastic for that. I mean, I'm sure we've all added a video to YouTube, and you can easily copy paste and put it on your site, and it's shown on the front end. But it's also fantastic because they make it really easy for you to do a manuscript. They do it a couple of different ways. You can go into your video manager and you go to edit, and then you can go to there'll be a little section that says subtitles and CC for closed captions. And it'll allow you can pick the language that you want, and then it'll automatically create a manuscript for you. And another cool thing that they do is they allow us to, when we put a video, is to allow the general public to chime in and add the manuscript themselves. You can set that up. So any user that's coming watching your video can add the manuscript. And of course, you have the ability to approve or disapprove, so nothing gets put on your video that you don't want. And of course, you definitely want to check it out, because there's some knuckleheads out there. But
outsourcing for closed captions, I guess. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. And they just make it real easy. And I think that's a pretty good function right there.
Okay, so what's an example of a video with a good audio description? We can't play the audio. I would love to. We should have brought speakers, but The Lion King. This is a video that I found. The opening scene in The Lion King. There's no dialogue, but there's just animals running up. There's music playing, right? So if someone's hearing impaired, they don't know what's going on. They can see it. Obviously, they can see what's happening. If someone's visually impaired, they can't. So you have an audio description for what's going on. And this is a great example. I like this video. It's a lady that narrates over everything. She's like, there's many animals. They're running up the hill. It's really neat. There's beautiful music playing. And it's, the opening scene to The Lion King. Most of you have probably seen that. So if you get a chance, check that out. That's actually a good example of audio description for a video. Okay. Another very important thing is, we were just talking about this earlier because our slideshow wasn't doing a very good job of this, but ensure that color contrast meets minimum thresholds, okay? So your color contrast ratio should be a minimum of 4.5 to 1. I know that might not make sense to you, but there are actually and we'll get to them later in the slideshow, there are color contrast checkers that you can use so you can see that you meet 508 standards and you meet the 4.5 to 1 ratio. With the exception of links can be 3 to 1, okay? So let's take a look at what does an example of bad contrast look like. Well, here's a great example. That's really bad contrast. I've got pretty good vision, and the bottom one is even kind of hard for me to make out. I'm sure in a few years it's going to be almost impossible for me to make out. So this gives you an example of what not to do when you're designing on your website right here, okay? So what does good contrast look like? I think this is much better. It's pretty obvious, right? The words jump out of the page much better than the last example. So just make sure that your contrast is good. You want to make sure that people with visual disabilities, or I guess colorblind folks, can make out words on your website. It's hard for some folks. It really is. Okay. Next one is make your link text descriptive. All right. And so what do good and bad link descriptions look like? This is actually a pretty obvious one. So this is just a link on a test site that I set up. And these links, this is 2 links. This is a good link description, and this is a bad link description, okay? The good link says WordPress plugin repository. It's a link directly to the WordPress repo, right? So what's an example of a bad link description? You've all seen it. Click here. We've all done it. I know I have. Click here tells someone using a screen reader nothing about where they're going to go if they click there, okay? So just make sure that whenever you're making links, you're setting links up in your websites, make sure that it's descriptive, tells exactly where you want to go, maybe even a little bit about what it's going to do, okay? Now, I want to just break real quick if anybody has any questions about anything so far.
I don't know if you're going to go over it or not. Do you talk about color blindness?
I mean,
later on, are you going to be talking about color blindness?
No.
Okay, that's another one too. That it falls into the category of contrast. Mm-hmm. Is that there's a certain percentage of men, especially, that are green-blue colorblind. Mm-hmm. So if you don't think about that when you're designing websites, like you're doing like an entire site that's all in shades of blue, and maybe the contrast is pretty good, but if it's not really good, it's going to look like a wave of gray to them. And that's one of those kind of things to also think about. And there are sites that have, they do a test for that, and they'll look at it and they'll actually give you a suggested hex code for the colors to make them more contrasty.
Right.
So,
right.
And I think it may be the one you guys are probably pointing at, because if it's the one I think it is.
It's possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Alt text has been around for images for a long time. And there was another field there called description. Mm-hmm. Do screen readers also read these, or how should it work with the alt text? Or does it replace it, supplement it, or is it irrelevant? Or?
Right. That's a good question, and I don't necessarily have an answer for it. I would imagine that it may vary by screen reader. There's several different screen readers on the market, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question.
Right. I think in general, screen readers look to the alt text to describe the picture to the user. In our experiences, description text, really we use it for like Google and SEO. That kind of connects how Google sees that picture. They know that those words connect with that picture. But as far as screen readers go, from our experiences, the alt text is really what you want to focus on. And that's what's actually in the Section 508 guidelines, is to make sure that you have alternative text for all non-text content.
Is there a word limit, a character limit for alt text?
No. You just want to be very descriptive. And there's a couple examples that I've been approached with that, like, if you have a dog laying there and your alt text says it's a dog, but then you have another description of it. It's a dog laying down or a dog playing with a ball outside. You know, you can get much more detailed, and the more detailed you get is really is what it's all about, because that's what elevates the end user experience to somebody who's using a screen reader.
I was going to tell you, by default, when WordPress puts the image inside the HTML, like when you basically insert an image and they put it in there, they're going to use the title, the alt. They don't always use the description.
Right.
And unless there's a setting that you can make it use a description. But the title also is not 508 compliant. I always thought it was, and I would do the title, but I wouldn't do the alt text.
That's what we always did.
Yeah.
Until we learned.
Yeah, because the title will be in there if you hover over it, but that's not for screen readers. The alt text is. So.
Maybe use for that alt text, just try to paint a picture, be a little more descriptive. I think maybe that's a good way to think about it. So, okay, any more questions? We're gonna
so far?
Yes. Is it any plug-in software to coach you through on how to put the right settings on the system y'all talking about?
There is, and we actually have a list towards the end of the talk of a few that you can use. So. All right, that's it. We're going to move on. Okay. All right.
All right. Number 6 is do not use color as the only indication of meaning. We got an incorrect example and the correct example. On this one here, it's required fields are in red, so your input values are labeled name and email. What that does is the screen reader is going to read it just as is. Required fields are in red, name and email. That does nothing for the end user who has a visual impairment or is low vision. So what you want to do is come over on this example and you say required fields are in red and marked with an asterisk. So when that screen reader reads it to the individual, it's going to be required fields are in red, marked with an asterisk, name, email, asterisk. So that user now knows the email is the required input field that they have to input. Another example of using color as an indicator. This kind of has a little something to do like what you were just talking about. You got an incorrect one here is which is the right angle triangle, and if you have a colorblind individual, like a lot of guys are, a lot of people in general are, they won't know that the one with the right angle is yellow. They'll just see the yellow, or they'll just see the triangle, and they won't be able to know what color it is for them.
The green one's the one with the right angle.
Yeah. No, they won't see any of that, so they will have no idea of which one to choose. So you come over here, and what you do is you label them, because they can obviously see the numbers, so they can come over here and decide which one it is. They're not reliant only on the colors. Pretty straightforward. Make sure your font size is at least 18 plus. This is probably one of the easiest ones you can have. 18 plus. Now there are a few caveats. They say it depends. Like it can be if your font is in bold, or if you use certain style of fonts. Some of them tend to be bigger than other ones. But the general rule of thumb is 18 plus. As long as it's always at least 18, you will be in compliance.
Seems kind of large, but there you go.
Number 8, if there's an input error, it's gotta be identified, and it's gotta be described in the text to the user. So that's to do with our error handling. A good example is this. If an individual who's low vision is going to a site and they need to input, this is a simple contact us form. They input some, you can see the asterisks, you can tell these are required. So if they don't input those things, you can't just have a screen pop up and not give them any information. Their screen reader will read as is. Please review the errors below. This is required. Title is required. Last name is required. Zip code is required. You're specifically telling them what they've missed and what is required. So again, this falls back on your error handling. It's pretty simple to do, but it makes a huge difference to individuals trying to navigate your site. And the next one is your entire website should be able to be navigated using only your keyboard. They call this tab navigation. It's a pretty simple, straightforward thing. You can go to any of your web pages and you just start hitting tab, and you'll see, your headers, and you'll just see things starting to light up. An individual has to be able to navigate your entire website by just using their keyboard. That's very important. And if you miss just one thing on there, it'll make a big difference to the user experience. They could be stuck in a loop where they just can't get out of that page, and that's no good. Number 10 is you got to use flexible time limits, if any. When we build our sites, just general sites, you don't typically need time limits, but we do understand that there are times that you will for security issues, when you're dealing with banks or any kind of pertinent information that you need to keep to yourself. There's typically a time limit associated with that page. So what we suggest is if you have to have a time limit, then just give the option for the user to be alerted and given sufficient time to indicate more time is required. Basically, a little something comes up that says your time's running out, and give that user enough time to be able to click a button to extend their time.
You're talking about like for when folks are like logged into like a bank website or something like that. For like online banking.
That's how when I'm in my bank, if if you have a period of inactivity, you open a new tab, and next thing you know, 20 minutes later, you're like, oh yeah, wait a minute, you go back and you're logged out.
Okay.
It's just something as simple as that. Most websites generally don't need that, but again, when you're dealing with banks and credit cards and important stuff, you'll always have a time limit. So if you have to have a time limit, just give them an option to get more time. All right. Number 11, provide skip navigations. Skip navigation links so that users can skip repetitive content such as nav menus. Now we all know just every page has got your nav menu up top, and the big sites, the big beautiful sites, you'll have the drop down nav menu and all that stuff. Well, to a low vision user, every time they go to a new page, their screen reader is reading that navigation menu over and over and over again. They'll go through the whole thing. And I personally, that doesn't bother me because I don't need that. I can go through, I have my mouse, so I can skip to the part I want. But to a blind individual, they have to wait for their screen reader to get all the way down the page so they know where they want to go and what they want to do. So a real good thing is to add skip navigation links. Let them skip over the redundant stuff. Easy way to do that. There's a couple of ways to do that. We suggest go to the repository, download WordPress Accessibility plugin, and the very first thing you see here is add skip links. And you just click it, and you're done. You hit save changes, and you're done. You have skip links now for the end users. There are other ways to do it if you're bogged down with enough with too many plugins, or if you just are that type of person that wants to do it manually. I'm not going to go over to the detail, but we did add a couple of slides, so you can always come back and check that out. But basically, on your child theme, you're just going to end up editing 3 of your PHP files. And we break it down how to do that on this slide and the next slide. So if you guys are interested in that, you can always come back and check that out for yourself.
And if I can, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 2017 theme already has skip links in it. And I believe you're going to run into several that do, but I'm sure you're going to run into some that don't. So this
Good
won't
themes.
apply
I
to
know
every theme.
Genesis does in some of their themes. They do the skip links automatically in it, and I know that Generate Press does.
Okay.
So there are certain good responsive themes that are accessible, and they'll list it in their accessibility guidelines if they're doing that. They'll have the Araya navigation things built in, which they should anyway, and they'll have skip link navigation included in their descriptions.
So make sure that whatever theme you're working with does have, the ability to do skip links or add them yourself. So.
Right.
All right. So.
You got any questions on the last set? Yes.
What about reCAPTCHAs where they say, click in each box that shows a street sign, or, in order to fill out the form?
Right, for the reCAPTCHAs. To be honest with you, I have not run into that situation yet, so I can definitely look into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I don't find the reCAPTCHAs very accessible myself because
I hate them.
I can't read that. I can't ever read whatever the text is that they do.
Yeah.
I can't stand those.
If I don't get it on my second or third try, I just move on.
Yeah, I cannot stand reCAPTCHAs. So
Right?
yeah,
Okay, cool.
You might be a robot.
I might be.
Well, that was just a real quick run through of the 11 steps to help with your compliance. I want you guys to understand this is very important. If you followed every single one of these 11 steps to the T, you're still not in compliance. You are still not Section 508 compliance, and it's a long list of things you have to do. What our intention with this is really to bring the end user's experience up. Doing these things, which we feel are fairly easy and incorporating into your process of making websites or software, you can really just raise the bar. You're allowing 253 million people that weren't able to navigate any website. Now they're actually able to somewhat navigate. And you are still open to lawsuits when those things start coming around. So we just want to make sure you understand that this does not bring you into full compliance. We'll be here all night trying to explain every little piece of minutia to bring you into full compliance. So again, we're just trying to give everybody a good starting point to add to their processes, and it'll really make a difference. And that's what it's about. Yes, sir.
You mentioned fines. Who is the fining authority? Where is you mentioned lawsuits. Where is this going to come from? When is this going to come into vogue? When do we need to be aware of this?
Well, they've already somewhat started. It's law for federal agencies. They have to be Section 508 compliant. And
So what about my Jagger stuff, PW block?
there's no time. There's no time limit. They were supposed to make Section 508 law this year, but that got pushed back. So your guess is as good as mine, but if there's money to be made, it'll be made.
If you're building a website for a company and that company needs to actually communicate and or record anything legal for their clients, that's when it becomes a picture. That's when it becomes an issue. Anytime that money has to transact, privacy information is being collected, any of those kind of things like that, it's immediately become required at that point.
Okay.
If they are having to input information from customers and they don't give an alternate method, that's when they're in fault, and that's how you build it in.
And it's like anything else. The bigger your company, the bigger target you are. The smaller company, probably a lot of people in here might not have to worry too much about it at this point. But if you're a big Fortune 500 company, they're looking at you. If you're a federal agency, they're coming after you.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, because I get filled this question a lot from companies, but if someone with a disability brings it up to that company, that their website, they don't know that, isn't there like a certain amount of time they have to fix it? If they don't fix it, then they will go after, then they'll.
They could.
Do you all know the time? Is that true? Or
I haven't seen that in the 508 guidelines.
Okay.
That there was a time limit. So not to say that it doesn't exist, but I haven't heard of that.
Well, like a good example would be like healthcare.gov. If they hadn't done it, obviously they would have put 9 million people unable to get their whole health insurance.
But if someone access one of, our smaller companies, just say, like, do we have to, we have to make it compliant, but is it just showing actions towards it, or?
Well, to be honest with you, like I have a restaurant and I know that me working towards that, they don't want to hear it. It either is compliant, it's either, handicap compliant or it's not. And I've had that situation to where a lady with a wheelchair come in and our bathroom was not compliant and she brought us back there and said, how do you expect me to use this restroom?
But isn't it different because the website thing is so new?
Yeah, well, as far as the Section 508 really isn't law for the smaller sites and stuff like that. It is for federal agencies.
Okay.
And they are planning on making it. It was supposed to, I think it was February or January or something this year. It was supposed to be fully enacted to where, yes, if you have, doesn't matter what size your site is, you have to be compliant. But that got pushed back and there's no date at this point.
Got it.
So.
Well, I would imagine for like a bank or something like that, they would have doctor's offices, anything where they had to do any kind of intake or any kind of anything that was required in a legal sort of way.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. You had a question?
I was just going to share some anecdotal stories about the ADA compliance with businesses. There were stories that I had read of lawyers that had driven down to Google streets and had picked on a business and said, I will file suit and submit a complaint to the feds about this business. And they've never visited it. They don't know whatever it is. But that created a whole bunch of pain for that particular business becoming in compliance.
Absolutely. I mean,
so that was an industry that these lawyers had created.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I can visualize this happening.
Oh yeah, it's just a matter of time. Absolutely. I mean, it was a few years ago. There was a local lawyer group in Pinellas County that had one lady in a wheelchair that was literally going around to different spots and just seeing if it was compliant or not. And if not, that restaurant or that place gets a letter from the lawyers. That's just how they operate. And yeah, it's just a matter of time before that happens on the internet as well. That's why we feel very strongly about just getting ahead of the curve. If you can implement these things, you're not fully compliant, but you're much more compliant than the website right next to you or the restaurant right next to you. So it just gives them, in my opinion, they'll just go after the easier target to begin with anyways.
And if you have a small, simple website, really this 11 steps might just put you into compliance actually. So, but we don't want to blanket say that, so obviously.
You're not lawyers.
Right. Yes.
Did they, at the symposium you went to, did they go over what a low vision person, what websites they tend to go to? Does a hearing impaired person stay away from YouTube? Does a low sight person try to go to an insurance website, or did they?
No, it wasn't really broken down like that. There was throughout, people would talk and stuff, but
go ahead.
Mostly it was about just, you had guys from Google talking about Google, you had guys from NVIDIA talking about NVIDIA.
I think she's got to comment specifically on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on YouTube, as someone who's in the deaf community a lot, you're going to have people on YouTube all the time. So go ahead and if you use YouTube, triple check your captioning, because deaf people use YouTube like everyone else drinks water. It's not also just about the low vision or the people who are using screen readers. Like as someone with a read disorder, this is like, I'm not even bothering to trying to read this. I'm just listening because I can't read anything. The top half of the screen is basically not there.
Yeah.
When I first loaded it into Keynote, there was something going on where the whole, whatever was doing that white flash was like high opacity, and I had to take it all the way down just to even read it on my screen. So,
but it's not, it's about like, you want to use screen, you want to keep compliance with screen readers, but in some ways screen readers are the easiest things, like the alt texts. Like the alt text, you're basically like doing storybook. I've read the alt text, and I've actually listened to audio like for blind people. I turned on the audio thing just to see what it was like, and it's basically you're reading a storybook. It's actually the color contrast and the sizing that is in some ways the most difficult, because you have to realize that you can't take everyone into account, but like, you almost want to get rid of some of the prettier things, so that way you can stick with the black and white and the perfect contrast.
Right.
Because otherwise you're gonna lose a lot of your audience.
Well, coming as a plugin developer and working in plugins and stuff like that, I had no idea that we had so many users that were blind developers building websites using our plugins. And, you know, like all the information she was giving me about like what the Araya reader and stuff like that does, and how I could help with like certain things. And it was like, this is awesome. And like we've like used some of those folks to actually help us make our plugin more accessible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I mean, especially when you're talking about user interface design, you know, how do you get around the form easier? How do you make that form easier to get around? You know, for a screen reader, if you can give them very specific points to be able to jump into, it's going to be easier for them to work with.
Yeah. Right. And to your point, like you said, it's kind of almost either or. You're either perfect contrast ratio and you're in compliant, or your site looks good. It's one or the other. It's hard to get the in between. You know, we had one job that we kind of made like a child theme or a separate site to it. So a low vision individual or disability would be able to click the link and then go to a mirror of that site, but with perfect contrast and, you know, everything good for them. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Like you said, it's hard. It's you can't have both. You got to find the medium where you're appeasing everybody. You got to make it look nice because you want the traffic and you want the jobs, but you also got to make it available to the masses, to everybody, not just individuals.
In the beginning, you were saying that there was two, the 508 compliant and the other one is the W.
The WCAG?
WCAG, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you said it's the W, whatever it was, you were totally compliant with that, and that 508, you're halfway there.
No, it's the other way around. WCAG is, you said WCAG was
WCAG, if you are compliant with WCAG, you've got nothing to worry about. You're 100% in there. But if you're only compliant to Section 508 levels, there are going to be some missing items. You won't be fully WCAG accessible. But again, WCAG is more the worldwide guidelines, and Section 508 is what pertains to America, basically.
Can you spell it for me?
WCAG.
Yes.
WCAG?
Yeah, 2.0. It's kind of like the whole privacy policy and the GDPR privacy policy that everyone's been hit with over the last month.
And they're working on 3.0 already. So, you know, just when you think you got it figured out, it's just like every other piece of technology. As soon as you got it figured out, they slap more stuff on there for you.
And these slides and video will be up by tomorrow.
All right, well, as promised, here's some tools for the developers. We got UserWay. This is a pretty easy one right here. It's just a piece of software that you can just add to your website, and what that does is that puts a little widget on the front end of your page, and that allows somebody with a disability. It makes your site much better. They can increase the font size. They can fix the contrast. It gives them lots of different options to use, so you don't actually have to go through your site and do all of these yourselves. You can add this piece of software, and it helps out tremendously. Now, adding this software, again, does not make you compliant, but it does help the user experience in the end. We got Wally with WA, those are actually one, so WA11Y.
Yeah, I've always found that particular, particular abbreviation incredibly inaccessible.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's cute, but it's not, Wally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this one is plugging, the repository in the back into your site, and you can download it, and what it'll do is it gives you a list of items that you can be in compliant with. Now, like a lot of things, it gives you the first bit for free, but if you really want to go in depth with it, it costs big money. We got the contrast ratio checker. It's just contrastchecker.com. It's very simple. You go there, you input the contrast of your background, and you input the contrast of your foreground, and it tells you whether you're compliant. It tells you whether you're level A compliant, AA compliant, or AAA compliant. Loop 11. This is where actual users with disabilities test your site and give you feedback. That's pretty interesting. They're not going to help you with how to fix it, but they'll tell you where your stumbling blocks are. So that's, that's very useful if you're really trying to help the end user.
So the first two are plugins, the next one's a website.
Well, UserWay is not a plugin. That's just a piece of software that you download and then you put on your site. It's very easy.
So how do you put it on?
Well, you download it and then it gives you kind of like a little short code that you put in the header when you go into your edit, and you just add it to your header.
Really, you should make a child theme.
Yeah, and your child thing, of course, assuming.
Yeah. And it's just a little piece of code, make a child theme, and then you add it to your child theme, and it's actually really helpful. We have it on our site.
And then it just simply adds a widget to the front end. And that's free. That's definitely free. And if you're looking for the easiest, freest thing possible, I would suggest the UserWay, because that at least gives the end user some options.
Okay, so Loop 11, is that a website or is that a plugin?
That is, it's a company, actually, like it's a website. And it's
So it's loop11.org or .com, or how do we
loop11.org. It's not on there.
Or just maybe Google Loop 11. I'm sure it'll be one of the first things that pops up.
And again, I mean, that's pretty helpful, but yeah, they don't tell you where how to fix your problem. So if you don't know how to fix your problems, how to get in there, it's a little bit more difficult.
Okay, these are a couple of this is some technology that helps. You can use it as developers. These are really just screen readers here. NVDA, I like it because it's actually made by visually impaired users, the two lead developers on it, and it's free. It's open source also, so it hits all of the good things. Chrome Vox, that's just a screen reader that you can add to Chrome. I've used that a few times. It's just to see what how it is to actually use a screen reader on a website. I've never used the NVDA, but I've seen demonstrations of it, and I think Joe's actually
I've downloaded and used it before. And if the NVDA screen reader is something you guys have never experienced, I would recommend downloading, just playing with it, but also YouTube it, because it's amazing the speed that you have individual with disabilities using this screen reader. It's just mind-boggling. It's just,
you can't even understand.
It's reading. It's like one of those guys at an auction, just talking super fast. I don't have a chance. It gives me a headache after a minute or two. I don't know how they do it, but it's really mind-blowing. It's worth the 5 minutes to YouTube it.
All right. So does anyone have any more questions? That is all that we've got. So.
Are these voluntary compliance, or are these regulatory?
Yeah, right now, unless you're a federal agency, it's voluntary. So it's yeah. If you're working with or for a federal agency, they have to be in compliance. They have to be 508 compliant.
Oh, okay. So if you want to work for the federal government, you really need to know these pretty well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to do any kind of web development for them, sure.
And it's just a matter of time before it is law. Like I said, they were supposed to make it official earlier this year, but that got pushed back. So it's just a matter of time before it's official for everybody.
Just as a business owner, I can envision a future where everyone has access to my website, and I love that idea.
Absolutely. One of the good things is 253 million people, like you saw, see a black screen that's 253 million potential customers. Depends on what your business is, what you're selling. And imagine the business advantage you would have for that as well. You don't want to talk like that, because it's all about helping the end user, but at the same time, as when you're talking to a business owner, dollars make sense. So.
But I like to be a business owner in a world that wants to include everyone.
Yes, yep. Absolutely. That's the key. That is the key. About. Yes, absolutely.
I like that world.
Well, you pointed out too, even just a simple action of closed captioning your videos, because how many people do most of their work on their websites, motivational speakers and stuff like that. All they do is have the video, and if you can't hear it.
Right, absolutely, it does no good. And YouTube won't just automatically put up the little CC button at the bottom. You've got to enable that, add the manuscript, so then that user can then press the button and see it. So, but YouTube makes it super easy, really easy. That's why we just recommend doing that.
Yourself. So. All right,
Is that it?
any more questions, anybody?
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, here, you got one more slide.
Well, just, you know,
It's just our contact info.
yeah, and our motto is one website at a time. You know, most of us are developers here, and we all know WordPress is growing, and the internet's growing, and while we're continuing to make the internet, you know, one site at a time, if we incorporate these simple processes, we can really make a thing. We can make a difference in the end over time. So that's really what we want to do. That's pretty much about it. Appreciate you guys coming out and caring enough about web accessibility. Nice boring subject, almost as boring as security.
Thank you guys. Seriously.
You've just watched a recorded presentation from our WordPress St. Petersburg meetup. We meet twice a month on the first and third Thursdays of the month in downtown St. Pete at the Tech Garage. If you've enjoyed this presentation and found it useful, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to be notified when new videos are added. You can find out more about WordPress St. Petersburg at our website at tampabaywp.org and at our meetup site at meetup.com WordPress St. Petersburg. Thanks.